Was now Republican Congressman Ronny Jackson, of course, the Admiral, member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Dr. Admiral, member of Congress, good morning.
Good morning, guys. Thank you all for having me. It's a pleasure to be here.
It's great to have you as well. You know, Brian set it up perfectly. All eyes are going to be on Washington today and tomorrow because the Secretary of State, Tony Blinken, is going to sit down in front of, you're in the House of Representatives, going to be in the House Foreign Affairs Committee, then tomorrow the Senate Foreign Affairs Committee. Folks like you have what questions for the Secretary of State regarding our chaotic withdrawal from Afghanistan?
Well, Steve, I'm on the House Foreign Affairs Committee as well, so I will be asking him questions today. I have lots and lots of questions for him. I want to know, first and foremost, what led to this? How did we get 13 Americans killed over there? How did we leave multiple Americans behind enemy lines as hostages? And how did we, instead of bringing all of these SIV interpreters that we wanted to get out of there that we'd already been vetting, how did we bring out all of these unvetted Afghan refugees that we now really don't know much about that are coming back to the United States? I want to know about all these failures. I want to know about why they're taking credit for things that they had no business taking credit for. We had a successful evacuation of American citizens from the state of Texas, and the first thing the State Department did was try to take credit for that as the first successful evacuation after August 31st, which they had absolutely nothing to do with. And I'm sick of them patting themselves on the back about the evacuation and how they got so many thousands of people out in the midst of the unmitigated disaster that they created. He's going to have to answer all those questions, and there are a lot more questions than that.
Yeah, Congressman, it was shameful that they would take credit for it, especially since so many of the groups that were successfully evacuating Americans, doing the job that our U.S. government should have done, said that the State Department was actually hindering and blocking their efforts in a very deliberate way. So, yeah, very shameful. I am concerned about this vetting process that you're talking about. And what kind of answers do you think you're going to get? Because I've been hearing things about child brides and, again, confusion over why some very clear allies and interpreters were not evacuated, but other people, planes full of people that had done nothing for America, did make it over.
I think this is just another example of their absolute failure. I think that they were desperate to get people on those planes to rack up the numbers so that they could show the American people that they were getting people out of Afghanistan, when in reality what they were doing is they were just putting a whole bunch of refugees on the planes, and they weren't really able to screen and find the people that we wanted. They weren't able to get our American citizens out, and they weren't able to get these dedicated SIV interpreters that have put their lives on the line for 20 years to help us. That's who we wanted out of there. Instead, we got a bunch of these people. Now, we don't know how they're being vetted. We know the vetting process is supposed to take months, and we know that we already have people back here in the United States that are out taking Ubers going out into town. Yeah. So I don't know what's going to happen, but it's going to be really bad. And I'll tell you, the one thing that bothers me today is we were already told that we were only going to have 3 minutes to question Secretary Blinken today because he has a hard time that he has to go. He is driving the agenda on when he's going to talk to us and how long he's going to speak to us.
Well, here's the problem, too. The State Department is still driving things where the Defense Department at least is open to work with these private groups to get people out. The State Department still has control of the entire process. And I think you have to focus on, number one, they're going to say it's Trump's plan. We pushed the deadline back. Would have been worse if Trump was there. Number two, why wouldn't they pull our hardware out? And why weren't they aware that Kabul will fall? Every other province fell without a fight. Why would Kabul be any different? And they're going to look to blame intelligence. Intelligence says, don't blame us. We told you. So how are you going to stop the finger pointing at each other if Blinken just every time he gets a question points to somebody else?
Well, I tell you, the finger pointing is going to continue, I'm sure, but we already kind of know what happened here, Brian. What happened is that the intelligence, for the most part, gave good intelligence to tell them this wasn't going to work. The State Department, the Department of Defense, to some extent, passed that on to the State Department. The State Department completely, 100% ignored all the advice they were getting, and they went ahead and they did this anyway. They ran this evacuation. It should have been run by the Department of Defense, and I hold Department of Defense accountable as well, because they did nothing to actually stop it when they knew that it was going to be a disaster. So everybody's going to share some blame in this, but the State Department, the National Security Advisor, and the White House, they bear the brunt of this blame right now as things stand.
Well, you're absolutely right, Ronny. It was just a chaotic withdrawal. It's a mess, but okay, so now it's a mess. We got to pick up the pieces. The Wall Street Journal today makes the point that the administration needs to be emphatic and say to the Taliban, we don't care what you think. we're going to get every American or every American ally out, and you're going to let us. So how does the administration do that with the Taliban, which, you know, their all-star team, their cabinet is full of people on our America's Most Wanted list?
Well, Steve, we've made it really hard for ourselves. We've given away every bit of leverage that we possibly had in this. First and foremost, we walked away from Bagram. If we still had Bagram there, and we still had a few troops there, we had some intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, some counterterrorism capability there, we could be telling them what to do, and they would be following our direction to some extent because there would be a price to pay. We have very little way to make them pay right now. You can see from this recent news last week, we can't even pick targets anymore. We blew up some innocent people thinking that they were suicide bombers. So I don't know how we're going to do this, but we have got to get in there. We've got to get our people out of there. At the very least, we've got to get the American citizens that are left out.
How do you answer this question, Admiral? When they reconstitute and it becomes clear that al-Qaeda now has a base of operations and the training camps start again, what is the plan to take them out? China is already negotiating to take over Bagram, our intelligence and our sophisticated equipment included. Where is the plan to take them out again? Well, we're going to be watching. How are you going to be watching? We have no human intelligence there. Pakistan's not cooperating. Russia, China, and Iran have already moved in.
Right. And even if you're watching, what are you going to do about it, Brian? Look what's happening right now. We just gave them $85 billion in military hardware to try to kill us with. So we've armed them to the teeth. We've trained them over the last few years. Even the Afghan army that we've trained now are turning on us because they see what we did and how we left everybody behind. And then now we have China and Russia in play. They're going to be somewhere in the country, operating somewhere in the country. That makes it exceedingly hard for us. So we have not only reset back to ground zero, excuse the pun, from 9/11, but we have emboldened them on the way out and given them more. So this is worse than it was on September the 11th. This is Afghanistan is a worse situation for the United States and a bigger terror threat than it was the day that we got there.
Congressman, I mean, I'm really encouraged that you're going to be asking him questions. I am discouraged that he's only going to be giving you guys 3 minutes each. But my question is, okay, so you have these hearings. Do you think, I mean, the American people are so cynical right now about what happens in Washington. They just feel like, okay, so now you're going to have these hearings. What's going to happen to them? Is anyone going to lose a job over what happened to the heroes that died, over giving our money, our weapons, our tax dollars to our enemies? I think people are worried that there will be zero accountability.
You know, Rachel, I'm worried about it, too, because there's some Democrats, including some Democrats on the Foreign Affairs Committee, that are talking a big game throughout all of this. We'll see what happens when they sit there and they get their opportunity to ask these questions. Are they going to be defending and providing top cover for the secretary? Or are they going to come after him with a strong, hard, point questions like we are as well? We'll see how that happens. And what's going to be the results of that? I don't know. Sure. I really don't think that Biden's going to fire his Secretary of State. I think that they're still trying to paint this as a big success. Right. But you know what? If something doesn't get done soon, whenever we get the House back in 2022, and I know that sounds like a long ways off, but it's not, we are going to hold people accountable. I promise you.
Well, that's